Well, I'm super pumped to have Mike Lipsey join me on this call. Mike Lipsey is the president of Lipsey and Company, which is a commercial real estate training and consulting company, which has been in business for 40 years, 1980, if I'm not mistaken. So, thanks for glad to have you on, Mike. Thanks for being here.
Chad, I'm delighted, and I'll answer any question that you'll ask me. I might avoid some, but I'll try to answer most of them.
Well, the one that's burning a hole in my mind right now is the commercial real estate brand survey, which you've been doing every year for 20 years now. I think the results just came out this morning, so I'd love to get your thoughts on who's at the top, and then maybe we could dive a bit deeper into it as well.
We've been doing it for 20 years. Matter of fact, we announced, and you're correct, at 9 o'clock this morning Eastern. When we did our first year, we probably had 100 people respond. And I had to beg people, please respond and vote. And we did it with a paper ballot. So you would email to us, and we would print out your ballot. And the ladies in our office, and guys, would have to sit around counting ballots. Well, then the second year we had maybe 500 people. And then the third year we had 1,200. And then remember, there's 5 votes for each ballot. And we had this complicated system. Well, for years now, we've been doing it electronically, that as soon as someone casts a ballot, the system that we use automatically is keeping up. So we know at the end of each day exactly who stands where. So you're right, this is our 20th year. And the reason I did it 20 years ago is this is our 42nd, 43rd year in commercial real estate doing what we do. And after 23 years, I said, I'm really curious what others think about each other, what investors think about brokers, what real estate investment trusts think about each other. So that's the reason we started our brand survey. I was just curious to know how others thought, who stacked up how and when. And so that's why we began it 20 years ago.
So what have you seen change in that 20-year timeline in terms of who's moved up and who's moved down? And there's, I'm sure, a lot of new companies that have come in that time as well.
Well, first, we've seen some companies that always get fabulous brand recognition, and we've seen many companies just disappear. If you look back over 20 years and you look back at years, 2, 3, and 4, firms that were on the list in the top 10, like Insignia was acquired by CB years ago. So there were a lot of companies that had been acquired that just disappeared. A wonderful company that was around for many years, which was the Stahlback company, was acquired by JLL. And so it really has been interesting to see companies that consistently were in the top 10 the very next year just gone. And there are some times that people still would continue to cast votes for that company that is no longer in existence because it's been acquired. But what we do in that case is, in the case of, let's say, someone voted for Stahlback years ago, we would give Stahlback credit to JLL. So there's been lots of changes, lots of movement. And another change, but we saw an interesting trend this year. You used to always see the major REITs and developers like Hines and Simon and Prologis, well recognized. Well, it became more of a broker survey, which, I wasn't crazy about because we wanted it to be real estate brands. Well, this year, we really are pleased. There are some brokerage firms that look like they slipped a little bit, but the reason there might have been a little slippage has been we saw the Blackstones, the Hines, the Prologises, the Dukes really show a nice movement this year, which affected some of the broker rankings. But it's not a broker survey. It is a commercial real estate brand survey. So that's developers like Trammell Crow, that's Duke Realty, it's investors like Blackstone. So it really was meant for all those that are in commercial real estate. So we really have, if you look at 2021, we really see great diversity now, and not just brokers, but those that are in our business.
Yeah, I was just talking to Casey Conway the other day. I interviewed him as well, and he was talking about Prologis. He said that they're planning to build 200 million square feet in the next year or two. So I imagine when news like that gets around, their profile of being a high recognizable brand definitely increases.
I will tell you something. We did their first training program, their second or third year in the business. So I don't know when that was, 20, 25 years ago. And we did it in their conference room in Denver. All right. About 8 or 9 years ago, they asked me to do a keynote presentation to their European offices. It was in a ballroom, either at the Hilton or, I can't remember which one. And it had hundreds of people in there. And that was just a European operation. It has been one of the most remarkable growth stories in commercial real estate. To think that 20, 25 years ago, you could get their key executives in a conference room, and now 20 years later, 25 years later, it is a huge global organization. Talk about a real success stories, and that shows up in our survey this year.
So at the top of the list was CBRE, which has been at the top for a while. Then JLL, Colliers, Cushman, NAI, Avison Young are in the top 5 as well. Do you have any forecasts on that change anytime soon? Do you expect there to be any mergers or acquisitions or anything change in that landscape? Because that list seems, at the top 5 anyway, seems to have been pretty consistent.
Well, I will say this. When you say CBRE's been at the top for a while, they've been at the top all 20 years. So we've had a variety of firms move into the 2-spot, 3-spot, 4-spot. So it would be interesting when you go back and look at the 20-year history, you'll see firms that were maybe the top 5 or 6 that aren't even around. But as far as who will be in it in 2022, I really don't know. And I really haven't heard much acquisition, conversation like we have in the past. I mean, up until 2020, March, there was always large firms acquiring teams and acquiring regional firms and, finding, good fits that fit maybe areas that they want improvement. For example, let's say you're a fine national firm, but you're missing a good retail group or a good industrial group. Well, you do one of 3 things. You find a boutique that is 100% industrial and you buy them and you bring them on board. Or you go to a team that is in another firm that really has done a nice job with a large market share and you acquire that. Well, we haven't seen much of that since March of 2020. And so I've heard very little discussion about acquisitions. We have seen some additions, but they've been not the traditional acquisitions where it's been a space planning organization that, a national firm would purchase. But we haven't seen much of acquiring an industrial firm or an industrial team. At least I haven't seen much in almost the last 9 or 10 months.
One of the fascinating things about it is this last year, with it being as wild of a year as it was, I'm actually surprised there hasn't been more shakeout or insolvencies or companies that just weren't able to continue going on, which would have been acquisition targets. I'm actually surprised at how stable this last year was, given all the uncertainty in the market.
Well, that's an interesting observation. I will tell you, I read early this morning in my new Fortune magazine, where the person that was being interviewed is concerned about all the vacancy, particularly in office and retail. Industrial's done great, multifamily's done great, net lease has done great, but in traditional office and retail, they expressed some real concern that with all the vacancy and the expected vacancy, there could be some defaults. However, I look at some of our clients that have done fantastic, but they are really diverse organizations. For years, Chad, we have been trying to get our firms to generate 40 to 50% of their revenue from something other than brokerage income. Property management, facility management, lease administration, mortgage banking, what else can you do? And many of our clients have made that transition, and they've done a very nice job in that transition. And so I think that's the reason we haven't seen a lot of stress, is because they have a number of service lines that will get them through, the sort of rough patch while we're waiting for other areas of the brokerage business to come back, because some have really slowed down. Some have done just fine. So I think that's one of the real advantages of today's companies. They are diversified organizations, and not 90% of the revenue is coming from brokerage, leasing. And we've said for years and years, try to get 30 to 40% of your revenue coming from something other than a transaction, which a lot of firms have done. Not because we told them to, it's just because it was really the smart thing to do.
Yeah, and at that top of the list with CB up there, they're a very integrated firm that offers all of those services. So clearly, some of the big guys are taking that advice as well as all the way down to the smaller guys. I really commend you guys.
And not to just CB, but CB, JLL, Cushman, Colliers. I mean, if you look at the top 5 or 6, almost all those firms have done a very nice job in diversification. I didn't mean to interrupt you, but I wanted to make sure that we're seeing that across many firms.
Yeah, and that's a very good point. And I commend you for putting out that report. I look forward to reading it every year to see who's moving up and down. And I think that that's a valuable resource you guys put out to the market. So I'll put a link to that survey in the description as well. And yeah, thanks again for putting that on.
I got to tell you a great story. So I'm not going to name names, but about 10, 12 years ago, someone had shown some slippage in our top 25. And they had a consulting firm, and the consultant said, ignore that Lipsey thing. It doesn't mean anything. And you can't make this up. The very next year, they were acquired by a larger firm, and they weren't even anywhere on the top 25. So sometimes when you see this movement, it could mean something. I'm not suggesting anything other than you're right. When I read it, I look at it and say, why did that happen? Why did they move up? Why did they move down? What did they do? Is there something going on internally? And I don't oftentimes have the answer, just instinct, but you're exactly right. I like to read it as you do. What does this mean?
I think it's some great market intelligence that you guys put out there. So I want to switch gears and talk about CRM software, because I've attended a session that you put on about CRM in the past, and I thought it was an outstanding explanation of CRM. And CRM, for those who don't know, is customer relationship management software designed to basically keep track of all the ongoing relationships that you have. And I think it's applicable not just to brokerage, but applicable to really any professional, whether it's in commercial real estate or anything, is having a good piece of software. So I'd love to get your thoughts on CRM software and how you see that fitting into a professional's business.
So I did a program today for a wonderful net lease firm, and the module is called the Business Development Machine. I think it's on the 5th or 6th slide. I have a slide of 7 or 8 of the most popular CRMs in commercial real estate: ClientLook, Apto, Salesforce, Ascendix, HubSpot, and I get this question all the time: Mike, you've got so many different CRMs up there. Which one do you recommend for us? And I always say the one you're going to use. So pick one, and whatever you do, don't then say it doesn't do my dry cleaning or detail my car and find another one a year later. You're not going to find nirvana. Find one that's got good support, good training, and commit to it. But I will tell you, Chad, if you ask me of all of the head scratchers that I see in this business, it is we're in 2021, the number of firms, teams, or individuals that are not committed to a CRM. It is number one, and it's been number one for years. We've been helping firms install, integrate, train on CRM since the spring of '82. I sold my firm to CB in 1982. I was in New Orleans. In 1981. In 1982, they brought a group in from LA with this very expensive system called 4-phase. It was my first exposure to something like a big computer system, and one of their functions was a CRM. And I'll never forget my regional manager, who was in Houston, saying, Mike, get all those file folders and start getting that information into this computer system. And it wasn't even DOS. It was this flashing green thing. This was the spring of '82. That was almost, how many years ago was that? 30 years ago?
38, 39.
So that's how long so that's how long we've been doing it. I'm amazed at the number of people. I say, what CRM are you using? Oh, Outlook. I said, no. What CRM are you using? Excel. I said, which CRM are you using? Constant Contact. It drives me crazy. And if you hire us as a consultant, particularly work with your firm or your team, and you've not selected a CRM, I'm giving you a heads up. The first thing we're going to do is decide, after looking at 3 or 4 CRMs, which is best for you. And we're going to now scoop up all these business cards and letters and handwritten notes and spreadsheets and slowly start migrating them into your CRM. It's one of the finest ways to dramatically improve the productivity of your individual brokers, your teams, or even your organization.
Yeah, I started incorporating a CRM about 3 years ago, and I'm on a team with 2 other brokers, and it's interesting the evolution of it. One of the guys is super organized. He tracks absolutely everything, every commission dollar that comes in, every lead, everything, every piece of data that he has is incorporated in there. And I'm a few steps behind there, but I'm very vigilant at tracking every lead that inquires off of a listing, or every property that we have is uploaded into there, so we can track tours and everything that goes on there. But the evolution of how you can dip your toe into a CRM without having to take all the bells and whistles that come with it. You could probably relate as well. A CRM, when you first get it out of the box, it can be very overwhelming with all the add-ons and features that it has on it. And if you're going from an Excel-based spreadsheet model like I and many others had, and you try and go to a CRM, which is very overwhelming, it can be difficult to take all that on there. So I think it's important to also just dip your toes in and before you jump in head first.
You're so right. And here's been our instructions as a consultant. Once they've selected whichever one they select, then we get together a little committee and say, what are the 10 most important functions you want to know about first? Create a record, develop a phone list, attach you follow what I'm saying? Mm-hmm. And then we tell the CRM trainer, I will throw you out of this office if you go into your deal. They want to know how to do these 10 things, and then full stop. We're going to do it in a lab, and the broker and their assistant or team member is going to be touching the keyboard. You're going to have them create a contact record. You're going to have them do a lookup. You're going to have them do a search. You're going to have them attach a proposal to a contact record. And when you get to the 10th one, they're going to do it 2 or 3 times, and that's it. We're not going to invite you back for 90 days. And when you come back in 90 days, we're going to do 11 through 20. And then in 90 days, we're going to do 21 through 30. And now, after 12 months, there's 40 of the most important items. So when you say dip your toe in, you're exactly right. But you must be firm with the CRM trainer. They come from the software solution. They know everything about it, and they just throw up on the brokers. And the brokers are confused after 15 minutes, and they're overwhelmed, and now they're not listening to a word. And maybe only a staff person who's comfortable with software is listening, and they end up being the only one that can use it. That's got to be a hard and fast route. We train more brokers than anyone on the planet. You must demonstrate, here's how you do these 10 functions, which will really help your business. And do them over and over again for 90 days. And don't get ahead of yourself, but we'll show you 11 through 20 in 90 days. That's the way it works. You do it any other way, you're going to have frustration. They're not going to use it. They won't like it. And guess what they want to do? They don't like the program, so let's get a new one. This is what I say. So that program didn't work. It wasn't suitable. It was hard to use. It was confusing. And the reason is because no one was trained to do it. And worse yet, they let IT do the training, who happens to be the only person that understands how to use it. Understand, you're going to get me so wound up because we've been doing this since 1982. I know. Now, there's a lot of programs I don't know how to use. Like, we love Client Look. I love the founder, Michael Griffin and Chuck Cutler. But I keep using the term groups. But one of my clients kept saying, but they use a term called fields. And so that's part of the problem because I'm not comfortable with each program. They do have a nuance. But I do know this. You tell whoever is going to do your training, which is not us because we don't train on individual software programs, here are the 10 things we want to know how to do, and don't get crazy, don't give me any more. So you've got me all wound up, but that's how you ramp them up over 12 months. It's got to be a 12-month program, but you got to train them. And I'm always amazed, Chad. it's this huge sum that is spent on the purchase of the program, the installation of the program, and nothing is spent on training. It's just crazy.
Yeah, and I can speak to that as well. The first CRM that I actually tried was one of the really high-end ones that was specific to commercial real estate, and they had developed it and charged a lot for it. And that was the first one that I tried. And actually, I didn't immediately gravitate to it. And I think it was because there wasn't necessarily any specific training on it other than just watching like a video online. And I don't think that that's satisfactory, because the next one that we went to was actually a much more simple one that we ended up having to tailor towards commercial real estate. But because we actually went in and built it ourselves, we had a much better feel for it intuitively on how it works. So just by nature of us customizing it, we were more familiar with how it worked. And that's the one that we've used now for 3 years. So I think the training is a key part of that. You can't just rely on a series of web videos. You actually have to have someone walk you through how to do that.
Well, we have been for years and years renting computer labs, bringing in the head trainer of that software, whatever firm. But again, the broker gets frustrated. They don't integrate it. And here's another lesson. If, let's say, you have a wonderful rainmaker, a solid producer, who really doesn't spend a lot of time on the computer, you can't install a program and think they're going to use it. They're not. They're not going to create a contact record. They're not going to come back from a tour and go to that contact record and put the notes in there. So we've got to support the broker. And I've said for years, if you've got a senior broker that's a wonderful rainmaker, let them make rain. But train them to pick up the phone and say, Chad, I just did a tour of Main Street. The client really likes the property. Send them a thank you note for coming to the property, and send a thank you note also to the broker, and put back a follow-up in 30 days. So far, so good. Now, that broker hasn't touched anything, but the support team used the system. And now, on day 29, the support team comes to the senior broker with a phone list saying, you told me 29 days ago you wanted to call this person back in 30 days. They're now on your phone list. The broker hasn't touched the keyboard. That's a huge mistake that firms have been making, expecting these senior brokers to wake up on January the 2nd, key punching. It's not going to happen. And unless we give the broker the proper support, and I'm a perfect example. Jennifer develops my phone list for me every week. I don't ever develop a phone list. I guess I know how to do it, but I don't. I'm fortunate I have a wonderful team member that does it for me. And I'm more like a broker that loves the system but doesn't use it the way it's intended, but I'm able to use the output that it's able to produce.
Well, we've covered a couple really diverging topics today, talking about commercial real estate brands and CRMs. But I think that ties neatly into what you guys offer as consultants. So I'll put a link to your guys' website, Lipsey and Company, in the description as well. But just as closing comments, any guesses what happens in 2021 at either a brokerage level, economic level, just the world in general? Any guesses for 2021?
Well, Chad, if you recall, I mentioned to you that I'm not an economist. I'm a grunt. I think of myself as either a plumber or an electrician. And that's why I relate so well to the brokers. I think daily. Here's how I would answer that question. I'm a huge football guy. I love high school and college football. And not every Saturday or Sunday or Friday night if you're high school are you going to have the perfect weather. There's some days that it's cold, some days it's wet. And whatever is the weather forecast is going to affect your game plan, right? I would answer that question. I have no idea what the playing field for commercial real estate is going to look like. So I have to have all the skills necessary that can enable me to develop a game plan to put points on the board. So, and I shouldn't say this because there's some wonderful economists out there. I leave the room. You know, I'm in Orlando, Florida. You know, you follow what I'm saying? They talk about the millennials, and I can't develop a business plan around that. Do I have the skills, processes, and systems that, based upon what the economy gives me, that I can adapt. And that's why so many firms have done so well. They put in lease administration, property management, facility management. They put in enough tools that, based upon what the economy gives us, we can now adapt. So that's the one point that I would make to your question. Do you have an organization that can evolve and adapt to whatever shows up? Because you're not going to control the economy. It's not going to happen. And you're not even going to be able to forecast when we have herd immunity. You just don't know. So what does the playing field look like when you wake up on Monday morning? And so you adjust your game plan accordingly to take advantage of what you have. So that's how I would answer that question.
Oh, that's a great answer. I love it. That's very well said. And as a former student of yours, taking some of your training, I can attest that you guys offer some world-class training, and everything that you're talking about with process and skills and systems, you guys do offer that. So I really do appreciate you jumping on this call with me for your wisdom, and I hope to be in touch down the road here.
Yeah, I'm delighted. If we can help you in any way, you let us know.
Thanks so much, Mike.
Okay, thank you.
Take care.